Hey everyone, it's Steve Cohn, the founder of Validately, and thanks for everyone's time. We're going to get started. Looks like we have a bunch of people joining, but we'll get started. I want to start by introducing you to Laura. I'm not sure, hopefully everyone knows about Laura, but if not, at the risk of being redundant, I'll just say I think she's an exceptionally gifted user designer and researcher. She's written some terrific books on the topic, and her experiences, applying these theories in day-to-day practice kind of speak for itself. For those of you who are into kind of lean and have read the book, The Lean Startup, Laura was the first UX designer at IMVU, which was kind of Eric Ries's startup that turned out to be ground zero for the whole lean startup movement. So she was right there, basically launching the whole discipline of lean and user research. And she's gone on to write books, and she speaks regularly at conferences, and her work experience is tremendous. So we're very honored to have her speak with us today. This is going to be recorded, so if you want to watch the video afterwards, we will post that to our blog. And without further ado, let's turn it over to Laura, and she can kind of give us the topic here today is advanced kind of user research. But please, as you go through, think through questions you might have for Laura. We have some content, but we definitely have some time for Q&A at the end.
Thank you, Stephen. That was very nice of you. I don't know that I would describe my book as perfect, but it's always lovely to hear it described as such. Today's topic, we're going to talk a little bit about what to do with research, because a lot of us are doing it, but it's useful to have some things to do after the interviews. So let's get right into it. So you've done some research. Good for you. But the next question that I have is, what do we do with it? Because too often the answer is nothing. And when it's not nothing, often the result is, some long report takes days or weeks to create, sent around to team members to, let that it maybe. Is this sounding familiar to anybody? But what this leads to is it leads to user research getting ignored entirely and research getting seen as not really very effective. But I believe that there are better ways. And let's look at some of them. Today, we're actually going to look at some tactics. And as with so many things, what you do with research, specifically, with like which deliverables you create and how you use them or you share them with your team, it depends very much on your goals for the research. Because research in a product team setting, at least, it's not the end. It's not an end. It's a means to the end. And you need to know what you want out of your research in order to determine what you should do with it. At a very high level, there are two main reasons that we create research design deliverables. We do it to inform ourselves, and we do it to inform others. So let's take a little bit of a look at how those differ, because I think a lot of times research is a very other-focused thing. It's a lot about convincing. When we create deliverables to inform ourselves, we're creating things that are specifically meant to help us or our immediate team members make decisions about the product that we're working on. These are, documents or processes that are designed to help us understand and interpret research. We want to translate that research into better product decisions. And these are activities that can be done by the team by the team specifically that's intimately involved with the research and the design of a specific product. So for example, if you're on a small product team or at a startup with just one product, these may be the only type of deliverables that you ever create after conducting research. The point to these tools is that they're very useful for analysis and synthesis. And we'll talk about what some of those are in just a minute. But first, I'm going to talk about the tools that we use to inform others. If you work at a large company, or you're part of a research team whose goal is to inform work of other teams or employees at your company, there are a few different deliverables that are more useful for communication than for analysis. Part of your job might be to communicate your research findings to other product managers or to an executive team, or to make sure that engineering has a really solid understanding of the customer. Even if they can't necessarily be involved in the research itself, So often I get asked, this is the most common question that I ever get in talks, and I may get it in every single talk I give, is how do I socialize this research in a large organization? How do I, make people understand what I do and make them think that it's useful? And how do I get this research out into, the product team? Well, some of the tools we'll talk about in a minute are specifically designed for that kind of communication and socialization of research. So that's great. Thank you for the high-level blather, Laura. What are they? Let's take a look at the actual tactics that you can use and when you might use them. And we're going to start with the tactics that you might use to inform yourself and your team. The first one is an old favorite that you probably have seen before. It's called an empathy map. And I find it to be a really nice way of synthesizing research and building a view of real users after performing some early research. Imagine that you've conducted some number of user research interviews. It can be the kind where you watch people use your product, or the kind where you're just talking to people about their lives or their processes. I think they work best when you've seen folks interact with some product, either yours or your competitor. Now, after you interview each user, take 5 or 10 minutes to write down observations onto sticky notes. I like to use different colors for each participant, just because it helps me create pictures of different users. And then you split the observations into different sections. There are a few different versions, but this is a nice one. You can look online for lots of templates. But you want to split the observations into what the customer sees, what she hears, what she thinks and feels, and what she sees and does. And what the user sees would include things like the environment and the context of the user. When she looks around, what is she actually seeing? Things she hears are things that her friends and influencers that she pays attention to are saying. Things you feel are the internal workings of the user. Her worries, her aspirations, how she's feeling when she uses a product. And say and do are going to be the way that the user presents herself and how she acts toward other people. Now, once you've placed your sticky notes, you're going to have a wonderful overview of really the important things impacting the user's decision-making around your product. It's just a fabulous picture of a user. You can add real quotes or pictures of the actual users that can sort of help build a portrait of people. And it's based on real input from real research. These are also really helpful for generating personas, which I'm not specifically covering today, but I think that these are a really nice lead-in if you are creating personas. And I do talk about how to do personas better in detail on my podcast, What is Wrong with UX? But this is, I think, a very good way to actually gain the understanding for your team of the user to then turn it into a persona. So that's empathy maps, and those are great. But once you have a really good overall view of the user, you need to start to visualize the interaction that she's having with your product and the process that she goes through when performing the actions that involve your product. So for example, if you're building Instagram, you need to understand sort of what happens before, during, and after the user decides to take a picture and post it. What's she doing? Where is her phone? Why does she decide that something's worthy of a picture? Is she taking a selfie? Does she want to take several and pick the best one? I know I do. What's the process? How long does it take? What's the context? In other words, what's the story that is going on in which your product is a player? So hopefully, during your research, you've collected a lot of these stories from your participants. They've told you what happens when they use your product. They've shown you what happens when they use your product. It's your job to take all of those different stories they've told and break them down into the kind of thing that you can actually design from and design for. So if you're fond of sketching or storytelling, storyboards are a really fun way of presenting the stories that users told you. I like to use this model where I actually show the before, during, and after for each task that I'm creating. If you're not a sketcher, and as you can see, I am not, writing the stories in short prose can actually be really effective. Don't get stuck in the sort of agile model of, as a customer, I want to, no, just tell the story of the user. Try to explain, what exactly is happening for each task. And make sure that you're telling several versions of the stories that users have shared with you, errors and all. Well, I'm taking the picture, but it's not a great picture, so I don't want to post it immediately. And, I want to apply a filter, and then I want to look at it and see if I want to take another one. Something like that, like a real human story. By going back to all of your research and collecting those stories and then combining them into several common ones, you help to build up this view of the most common uses and contexts for your product. These stories are going to reflect the patterns of use that you see in your research, and they'll help you understand the most important flows to design first. Okay, so that's empathy, maps, and storytelling. Now we're going to get into a little data, because as you know, I like numbers. If you're data-driven, and I sincerely hope that you are, and you have a product out in the world, you will have both qualitative and quantitative data. And there is a wonderful way to synthesize the qual and the quant together in order to see the effects of things like, usability problems on actual metrics. This is a very good visualization for any sort of multi-step process that you may be measuring both qualitatively and quantitatively. So imagine you have a checkout process, and you're measuring to see how far people get in that process. This is a funnel that shows that you can see that you have probably way too many steps in your checkout funnel, but it works really well for showing what a funnel is. And at each of these steps, right, you're losing some people. When they hit the create account step, you're losing 20 people out of every 100. The select plan, you're losing 8 more out of every 100. This isn't great. And maybe you notice in your analytics that you have a drop off at a particular step where you ask people for their payment info. Now, there are a lot of reasons that might happen. And a lot of folks are just going to start blindly coming up with ideas why there might be a drop off in a particular place in order to try to fix it. But a better way is to run some qualitative usability testing on the checkout process to see what's happening. And so once you've done this, so let's say that you've used your analytics, you've seen that you've got a problem in your funnel, you've done your qualitative research, your usability study, you get all this usability data for research, and it's fantastic. My way of analyzing this data, I think that by showing the observed user reactions, problems, and failures right next to the actual step, and even if you've got space, the actual data about the user drop-off, you can see the potential impact of usability fixes. In other words, let's say that you do some usability testing on your checkout flow, you see 5 different problems that people have. By comparing where you saw the problems with the actual metrics of drop-off, you can more easily make decisions about which problems to fix first. So this is a really good tool for prioritizing fixes that you observe in usability tests. Because, I've noticed a tendency on the behavior of qualitative researchers, I will say myself included, we want to fix everything. We want to fix all the problems, right? It's hard. I get it. It's hard to watch people struggle in research sessions. It's painful. I have a friend who calls them hostage videos. It's sad to watch people fail to use our product. But the truth is, we work in resource-constrained environments, and we have to make hard trade-offs about which things we're going to fix when. And by visually combining our qualitative research with our actual user data, we get a more objective view on the real return on fixing various problems, so we can fix the worst ones first. So another synthesis method I'm going to talk about very briefly, I just want to mention, is the rainbow spreadsheet, which is a method I learned about from Tomer Sharon. And if you're not reading Tomer Sharon's books and slides, you need to start doing that immediately. But the rainbow spreadsheet is a great way of collaboratively collecting research data in real time. It does this by providing observations that team members can fill out for each participant in a usability study. I'll be honest, it's a little bit involved to set up, and I don't want to take a huge amount of time because he's written this great Smashing Magazine article where he explains the entire thing. But it's a really good way to get everybody on the team involved to help you collect the data on exactly what happens in the usability study. And the great thing is, at the end of creating one of these, at the end of your set of usability studies, if everybody watches this and fills out the study, you don't need to write a report. You've got all of your data right here, which is really helpful. So you'll see that there's when you get the slides, a little link to the actual article where he describes how to do this. The last synthesis method that I want to talk about that's helpful for assessing task-based usability studies is the usability scorecard. So I want you to say, let's say you have a usability study and you're going to have 5 different participants, and each one of them is going to perform, 4 different tasks. And I'm only showing 3 of them. I'm only showing 3 of the participants. So just create this usability scorecard that shows all the different tasks and all the different participants. As participants attempt to do things in the usability study, add a plus, a check, or a minus to indicate whether the participant completed the task with no problems, completed the task with some problems, or completely failed to complete the task. You can also add notes for each task and each participant, but the goal here is to create this really quick, high-level map of the tasks with the worst completion rates. So again, you know which ones to work on first. Now, those certainly aren't the only synthesis activities that you can use that are helpful in understanding what product decisions you can make. There are a few of my favorites, and I found most of those to be really terribly underused by many research teams. And I would love to see more people creating these kinds of really quick, useful deliverables that are good for a very specific purpose, and that is helping designers to understand what are the most important problems that we're seeing and, how might we fix them. But of course, as I mentioned, I get asked a lot how to communicate research to the rest of the company in a way that's going to help them to understand how useful it is, and also for ways to get others in the company to understand and incorporate research takeaways when they're making product decisions. And this can be incredibly challenging, and sadly, in some offices, nothing's going to work. But before you give up, just quit and move to another company, which try a few of these communication methods first. So, there's almost no better way to communicate research to other people on the team than to get them involved in the research itself. That's obviously not always possible. So the second best way is to make them feel like they attended research sessions by sharing video snippets, photos, and direct quotes. There are honestly, there's almost no way that's better than creating a highlight or low light reel of people having wonderful or terrible experiences. It really helps you to build empathy in the organization with the team. Where possible, you want to keep your video clip short, 30 seconds long, and you want to show several in a row that illustrate the problem or really bring it home. I know where I go 3 or 4 examples of users, and then I'd explain a simple fix that would prevent the problem from ever happening. And I would show these video presentations at lunch to the engineering team, and I would just make them watch 4 15-second clips in a row of people just struggling in exactly the same way in exactly the same place in the product. And I'll be honest, sometimes the bugs were fixed before lunch was over, because engineers don't like seeing people fail at using their products any more than you do. And showing them the real impact of products on the end user can really make them feel that pain and understand not just what the problems are, but how they might fix it. In fact, something called information radiators of all sorts are incredibly useful for bringing users into the building with you. Information radiator is actually a central software term, but it's really useful in UX and research. It's just a persistent display of information. Common software development examples might be things like a Kanban board or a screen that shows that the build is read. But by creating information radiators with the results of your research, you make it constantly visible to the team. These often include things like posters, because for some reason UX designers love posters, but you might do posters of the personas that you created with actual quotes from users that you put up around the office. Or you might take your empathy maps and put them on the inside of the bathroom door stalls. Just show people constantly wherever they look how users are feeling about the product. The key to these is you need to keep them up to date so that people don't see the same things all the time and start to ignore them. I think sometimes information radiators can get a little bit of a bad reputation because they can kind of turn into oh, look at the art project that the UX or that the design team made. But when you're showing really useful, helpful information on all these information radiators, it just creates this subconscious feeling within the building that the user is here and this is who it is. If I have to walk in, every time I walk in, I see a picture of the person that I'm building something for, I'm reminded of her, and I know to include her in my decision making. Another great technique, also suggested by Tomer, who does an awful lot of this because he works at a very large company, is what he calls the Research Expo. This is especially useful at very large companies with sort of more resources and time, and it's a little like information radiators on steroids. On his team at Google, every so often they take a whole day and they put on what they call a Research Expo. And they take a large room and they turn it into this sort of interactive gallery of strategic research results. They actually sound like a lot of fun. I kind of want to go to one. But they include things like looped video presentations, posters illustrating key findings, video viewing sessions with specific user clips, and then people from the user team sort of man each station, and they're available to answer questions and discuss findings. When they finish with the expo, they'll provide copies of the posters to managers and create a site to serve as a repository of artifacts so that the stuff stays persistent. If you want to read again about the entire thing, there's the URL. It's fantastic. And it really is a wonderful way, again, of bringing not just your own team, but executives, people on other teams, managers. If you're in a big organization, seriously, if you can get the time to do this, consider doing one of these. But as I mentioned before, single best way of convincing others is to include them in the research. This means actively inviting people outside of your team to go along on research sessions, involving stakeholders more actively in choosing a methodology or choosing questions or writing discussion guides, having them sit in on synthesis sessions, and making sure that all of that raw information is not only available to people, but that there's this culture in the company that everybody is responsible for participating in research. You need to train product managers to do their own research where possible. Make sure that the designers are attending all the research sessions, and require engineers to attend at least, I don't know, one session a quarter, one a month, something. Get them in there. Get them confronting human beings who are using their products. Whatever you're doing, find ways to include team members and others in all aspects of that research for the best results. So those are all really good, solid tactics, which either I've personally used or have been used by very senior researchers like Tomer. But just for fun, what does some of the bad stuff look like? What are the bad patterns? Because I will tell you, I have seen some folks produce research results that are, honestly, probably worse than nothing. And as I said in the past, research can be expensive and time-consuming, and even when we take steps to do it as efficiently as possible, I've always found that well-conducted and shared research more than pays for itself with results. But if you're not producing information that can be used by the correct people, it's just a giant waste of time. And I don't want any of you to waste time. I want you to make great products based on research. So let's not do these things. The number one biggest waste of time I see in research is the 30-page research report, which I will freely admit to having written in the past. Sometimes these are in the form of very long PowerPoint decks with lots of bullet points. Those are also great. These are awful for two reasons. A, they take too long to create, and B, nobody reads them. So interestingly, one of the big reasons for the second thing is first. You see, conducting research can take anywhere from a few hours to a few weeks. If it then takes up to a week and sometimes more just to deliver the report on the research, that's a pretty serious problem, because by the time the team has the report, the chances are they've made their product decisions and just moved on. Replacing long involved reports with these shorter, more targeted ways of delivering research results can dramatically increase the impact, since people actually use the results immediately. That's why in the first section, when I was talking about the synthesis things, those are very quick, where actually sort of create a deliverable after doing research. You don't have to take a lot of time afterwards. I talk to 10 people to go back through, figure out what all the things are. You've actually been tracking all of as you go, and you deliver as you do it. Oh, I'm hearing the voices. Any better? No. Let's see. Still bad?
Yeah, that's good, Laura.
Is this better? Okay. We're almost to the end, so hopefully that's I see this a ton. You don't want to share any of the prep work or the work in progress for whatever reason. Maybe you want to see things are half finished or get the wrong information from just watching one session. I get it. It's tough. You feel like people are in your way for just a small piece of it. But the answer is actually sharing more rather than sharing less. The more involved the team members in the planning and actual research, the more bought in they're going to be to the research. You've had a say in creating the discussion guides, screening participants, or picking tasks. So it's harder to ignore results because you've invested. Of course, the most extreme version of this is completely outsourced research, to an outside firm or to an internal agency within a company. Generally, this culminates again in that big extensive report with a presentation to you about your customer and what
Laura, you're breaking up. It's really hard to hear you.
No.
No.
Let's see if we can fix this. I'm getting reconnected. What's that?
Couldn't hear you.
No? Connection's down. I don't know why.
Looks like your internet connection might have an issue, Laura.
It might. Internet here looks pretty good, so. Hang on a second, I'll in a minute. Is any better? Hello?
It's still a little broken up, and your screen is also weirdly broken up. We see half of one slide and half of another.
I do a recording of the entire. This is It's actually the internet connection here is fine. Everybody else here has been okay. They're not having any trouble with the internet. So I wanted to join an issue or if it's no. I don't know what to tell you guys. I can call back in a minute on a different phone and questions.
Well, why don't we try that one? Call it from a different phone. Sorry, guys, everyone. If you just hang with us for a minute. Do you have a landline phone there?
Yeah, shouldn't be a problem. So I'm going to end this. This is the last line. Oh. Can we? Oh, just now seemed fine?
It sounded a lot better, and the screen looked crisp again.
Okay, how about that? You want me to try it? Well, let's try it.
Okay.
Let's just finish up. Okay, we'll just finish up. We were talking about all these problematic, all these very bad patterns. The last and the worst, I think, is this outsourcing to an internal agency within the company or outside of the company and getting that big expensive report. And I mean, look, there are times when people do, bring in outside user researchers to help you get research right. But there's a significant difference between hiring an expert to guide your research efforts and just telling somebody from outside your team or your company, learn as much about your users as possible and then leave. So when you do this, you're paying somebody else to get the most critical information in your company, who your users are. And that's information that you need to know. And you'll learn it best by conducting your own research. If you do hire outside experts, hire them as coaches and guides and facilitators, not as people who just go out and do your research for you and hand over a document in exchange for a big check. And that is everything that I have on the slides. So there are a few slides here from Validately. And Jess, or Stephen?
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much. And if you guys have questions, feel free to jump in. The series from Laura, she's talked about first unmoderated, then she did a session on moderated, and then here with advanced topics. For those of you who don't already know, Validately is a user research platform. We do we help you. Our mission is to take the pain out of user research, to make it super easy for you to to do the research, as opposed to all the manual tasks of setting up and conducting and running and even reporting. So some of the stuff around recruiting, finding your persona, we handle scheduling your sessions, we handling payments, all that type of stuff. Running your sessions is super easy with Validately, whether it's desktop or mobile. And then some of the reporting best practices that Laura was mentioning around creating clips. We're rolling that feature out tomorrow to be able to create clips so you can share that with your teammates. And in the coming weeks, we're going to be incorporating notes right into the videos, which will automatically create a report that you can share with your teammates without having to do a lot of extra work. The notes will be already linked to the spots in the videos for you. So doing a lot of stuff to help you share that with your stakeholders, and as Laura was mentioning early on, we offer moderated and unmoderated testing technology. And then for everyone who's on this, we are running a promotion that not only can we do this for you, but if you tweeted it out, we were going to give you guys a free credit to run a moderated test to recruit against your persona. And then we get really, really specific on personas, so you can tell us exactly what you need, and we find those people. We often recruit from LinkedIn or Google or Google AdWords or Facebook. We've done stuff from find me someone who gambles a couple times a month to find me a person who uses a specific software product that has a specific job title. So anything there, we're pretty good at finding those personas and setting up the session for you.
And it looks like we have one question so far, but if you want to just type them into the chat and put them to me at Jeff, I'm with Validately as well. So Laura, the first question is, when beginning a large build of a new product, how do you think about what should get tested? The constraint being that it would be too time-consuming to test everything.
So what do you test? The question that I would have is does this mean like for usability testing, or does this mean for making sure that you're building the right thing? Because those are a little bit different. While the person can answer whether they're talking about specifically like what usability tests versus like am I building the right thing? Usability testing, right? Okay, yeah, no. So the storytelling and the storyboards are actually really useful for that sort of thing, because hopefully when you did your early user research where you were deciding, what people need and what they're like and what tasks they're going to be performing, hopefully, you did all that before, so you figured out that you were building the right things. And so you should have gotten a very good vision of sort of the main tasks that people need to do. One of the things that I like to think about is like the primary thing that you need to test is that, what is that aha moment? What is that customer success? Why would the user be using this feature or this product? Why do they come to you, right? And the answer is they come to you because they want to be a better accountant, or they want to take better pictures, or they want to meet more people online, right? And so you need to figure out what are the specific tasks that they would perform within your product that would naturally lead to that user success. And those are the things that you need to make sure that you nail, right? If somebody can come in and solve the problem that they came in to solve, then they will be very happy. They will probably deal with other sorts of problems that maybe aren't so great, other sorts of things that aren't so great. And you can sort of deal with those, later. You can prioritize those a little bit lower. But you really want to focus on what are those key tasks that are the things that lead to customer success, whatever customer success means for you, right? The other thing is that if you do have metrics, if this is, a second version of something, or if you're adding a feature, one of the other things I like to do is I like to look at the metrics, like we talked about in the, that funnel. I like to actually look at the metrics and say, we're hoping that this metric, this business metric, is going to change. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, what would the user have to do to make that business metric change? Okay, those are the tasks that you need to make sure that they can do. If the user needs to make 5 friends really quickly, right, in order to, meet your business goal of better activation or better engagement, figure out what tasks would lead to that and make sure that the user can do that. The other thing I like to do, the last thing, third option, is I actually like to do some sort of just observational testing with, fairly high fidelity, not high fidelity, sorry, but high interactivity prototypes, and just let people use the prototype as much as possible. And to do that, sometimes I'll do user-defined tasks, which are, I'll ask the user, what's the last thing you did with this product? Or how do you normally do X? And then they'll tell me, a little story about, I did these 5 things. Say, okay, great, go ahead and do those. So you actually let the user define the usability test. You can only do that in moderated, obviously. Actually, that's not true. You can probably write the unmoderated question in a way, but it's easier to do it in moderated. So anyway, there are some options for how to pick what to usability test. But you're right, you can't test everything. Other questions?
Yes, another. I have a fellow product manager who infers far too much, in my opinion, from a small number of usability tests and initiates significant unfounded UI UX changes based on his assumptions. What can I tell him that might help show him the need to validate his assumptions before making big changes?
This is a hard one to answer because honestly, sometimes we do make fairly big changes based on small usability things that we see. Or based on usability problems that we see in a small number of people. This is sort of, that's okay sometimes if you're good at it. It sounds like maybe he's not good at it, which is a problem. So I have a couple of ways of dealing with this. It kind of depends on how confrontational you want to be. I'm going to write up a blog post one of these days, which requires, before you make a big change, for you to write down ahead of time what metric you think it's going to impact, because remember, we shouldn't be making major changes that don't improve specific metrics. So you write down what metric it's going to impact, how you think it's going to impact that metric, by what date, why you think this. You basically record, you place a bet ahead of time. And so this is a little bit more of a long game if you're going to do this. But so what would happen is, the fellow product manager would come in and would say, oh, I saw 3 people and, they all had this terrible problem and we're going to make this massive change to the product based on that. So you say, that's great. Let's record exactly what we're going to do, what you think is going to change, why you think it's going to change. I'll do the same thing for all of my stuff, right? And by what date we think that's going to change, and then we'll check it later. We'll actually be able to see, was I right? I have found that after they're wrong a few times in a row, you have more leverage to go back and say, yeah, the last time we did that, based on 3 people, it didn't turn out so great, right? And you have actual metrics to back that up, as opposed to just sort of like, hey, look, dude, stop, with the drawn huge conclusions from, one outlier. like I said, that's a bit more of a long game because you have to wait for them to be wrong a couple of times, and honestly, that can put you out of business if you're a small enough company. But the other thing that you can do is, if he's suggesting these major changes, just make sure that those major changes are getting prototype tested along the way. I mean, it's fine. You can say, oh, I think that we need this massive change to the product. Okay, great. Let's build a few prototypes of how that might work and test those first, because that's a lot cheaper than actually going out and building it. The problem isn't so much that you're making these big changes based on just a few inputs. The problem is when you're wrong. So we need to figure out ways to catch it when we're wrong earlier. How do you convince him to do that? Like I said, I think that you actually have to sort of prove that it didn't work out so great a few times around, which is hard for people to hear. So nice about it.
We have a few more questions coming down. One for Stephen, and maybe just a short response to this, and then if anyone wants more detail, we can set up a follow-up call. But someone asked what's the difference between Validately and usertesting.com.
Sure. Good question. So there's a couple of pretty significant differences. So first of all, I think philosophically we consider ourselves a software company, whereas they're a panel company that has software to deliver their panel. And why that's significant for you is because it plays out with regard to how you want to actually do your tests. So let me give you an example. When we do recruiting for moderated tests, for example, which our main focus is moderated. I think they do offer moderated, but they're much more focused on unmoderated. They're self-moderated. So when we do a recruiting for moderated tests, we actually give you the email addresses of the people and let you test against them as much as you want. Okay, so we do kind of a one-time recruiting fee that lets you basically build. We call it panel builder, not panel delivery. So we actually build a panel for you, and then hand those email addresses over to you to have you run as many tests as you want. Whereas philosophically, they're more of a panel company, so they don't give you access to those panelists, or their email address, so you can't really contact them and follow up with them, and they want you to keep coming back to their panel. Two, we believe in, there's value in a panel. I think the value of a panel is very limited to specific click testing. So can they go from task one, page 1 to page 2 to page 3 without getting lost? Panels are great for that. But if your focus is on moderated and really understanding user behavior, my experience is panels are not always great for that because they're kind of trained. And so when we do recruiting for moderated, we focus on real users. So we'll source those people from Facebook or from LinkedIn or from Google or whatever it is to find real people, not kind of trained panelists, to do moderated sessions. Just recapping: one, much bigger focus on moderated versus unmoderated. Two, we give you the ability to, we source kind of what we call real people versus panelists that get constantly take tests all day long. Three, we build a panel on your behalf and give you access to those people, and you could test against those people as much as you want because we want you using the software. Our price point is dramatically different, which gives you the opportunity to run, more testing for the same budget or even less budget. I think that the price point is significantly different. That's by design. Another great example of the difference for a low monthly license fee, you can test against your own customers as much as you want with no incremental cost. I believe user testing actually charges you more to test on your own customers than they do to test on their panel, from my understanding. I'm not, a customer. It's because they're a panel company. They want you using their panel, and it's less setup work for them. Whereas we're a software company, we want you to test as much as you want. If you want to test on your own customers, that's great. and you pay a low software fee, monthly software fee to test against them as much as you want. Our technology is very different. We don't have our technology doesn't require a download from the tester, whereas their technology does, which is why they want to push you to their panel, because it's a big setup effort. So those are some of the big differences. Does that answer the question?
Yep. Thank you. Laura, this is another one for you. If you're working with a team that operates on 2-week design sprints, what advice do you have for planning tests ahead of time while putting together a longer-term strategy?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So the planning test ahead of time really is more around knowing what kind of testing you're going to be doing in that design sprint, and having people who are ready to go. Because one of the things that I have found is that honestly, I was going to say, the big problem with a lot of user research is that, or the thing that takes the most time up front is often the recruiting. So paying somebody a small fee to get you the kind of people that you need, it can make that dramatically shorter. You can also, if you have sort of that group of people that you can go back to, and you sort of know that this is this kind of user and this is this kind of user, you can, that will shorten that life cycle as well. So when I say that you need to know sort of what kind of research you're going to do, you basically need to know, am I going to be doing like upfront, learning about the user, coming up with hypotheses, that kind of testing, or am I going to be doing like usability? To know that is that you really do actually honestly want to have sort of different types of users for each of those kinds of testing. Other than that, in a 2-week design sprint, it depends on whether you think about the design sprint as, how do I put this? It depends on whether you think about the research as part of the design sprint or if the research is being done before the design sprint. Different teams do it differently. I think design sprints should be based on the research. So in that case, the research is often being led by product managers who start with something like, we want to learn, like we're looking at the metrics and this thing is happening, and we want to learn more about why that is happening or how to fix that. So we're going to go off and we're going to do the research, and then we're going to use that to feed into the design sprint. So if the product manager is the one making that decision about like what to do, they should be working with the research team if you have or the researcher. I mean, you're all one, you should all be one team. We shouldn't have silos. But they should be working a little bit ahead of time to get that research done to understand what it is that they're focused on, what metric. I don't like it when design sprints are, surprise, let's all get together in a room and just ideate about anything we could possibly build. Design sprints should be based on something, some business goal. You should know the business goal ahead of time.
Looks like we have one more question for you, Laura. What do you do if you lack research resources while lots of new features are being shipped? How can you prevent untested features from being shipped without slowing down the pace of development?
Do it yourself. Most research, and I'm going to annoy absolutely everybody I know who's trained as a researcher, most types of research do not require, massively trained and incredibly experienced people to do it. You need some basic skills. You need to be pretty good at it. Your product manager should be able to do it. Your interaction designer should be able to do it. If they're refusing to do research because they're too busy doing their other job, basically what they're saying is, learning about what I should build or learning about what I should design or getting feedback on what I've built or designed is less important than this thing I'm doing. which I think is nonsense. Like, there is nothing more important that you can do than understanding who your users and what you should build for them and whether what you built for them is any good, right? That's more important. So all this stuff about like, oh, we don't have enough resources. Like, we don't have a human being to come in and like do usability testing. Oh, come on. Like, there are plenty of tools for you to figure out how to do usability testing. And if it slows things, if you feel like it's slowing things down a little bit, okay, you're shipping things that are better, which will speed things up in the long run. Like, it's not that you don't have enough resources, it's that you're trying to build things without getting feedback from users, and that's not okay.
Actually, one follow-up to your response there, Laura. What kind of research would you say is easy enough to be done by anyone? Our viewer is asking because she's experienced that those that aren't, well versed in research techniques tend to ask leading questions, prime users, etc.
Anybody should be able to learn to do usability testing. Are they as good at it as somebody who's done it for years? No, they're not going to be. Will they be better at it than not doing it? I mean, hell, if you're worried about doing leading questions and you're doing usability testing, do unmoderated. Very hard to lead when you're doing unmoderated. And also, like, you might not have the research resources to have somebody come in and run the research, but you might have the research resources to have somebody come in and give a quick, workshop to teach people how to be better moderators, to teach people how not to ask leading questions, to teach people how to write better tasks, to review a discussion guide. Lots of times, the problem is that somebody doesn't have time to come in and spend 2 weeks working on your thing with you, but they might have time to come in and spend 2 or 3 hours helping you to do the right thing. I actually encourage people to use their research experts more in that capacity, because a lot of teams do have, they'll have one researcher for 50 people. That person shouldn't be doing all the research. They should be helping to spread the research ability among the team. I'm seeing that the which types should the.
Did you see the follow-up question to that, Laura?
Yeah. Which should the trained researchers do? I think with some guidance, often I've actually given guidance to product teams and seen totally untrained user researchers do most kinds of research to a certain degree. Like, they're going to do better than not doing the research. I would always say that you should always be doing it together. But there are some sort of more technical things like, getting a diary study right. It's often good to have a trained person come in and do it with you the first couple of times. So it depends on what level the people are at. It depends on, sometimes product managers or designers are, naturally they're good at research, or they've done some, but all they need to learn is a new technique or something. It sort of depends, on the skills, the other skills of the people on the team, what they can do. I mean, I've known engineers who could run research, and they were great at it. Not all of them, but some of them. But you'll figure it out. You'll figure out which ones, the founder shouldn't do, or shouldn't do unsupervised.
Excellent. Well, I think that's all we have time for, but thank you, Laura, for the webinar and for all of your fabulous answers. If anyone has any follow-up questions, you can feel free to email them to me, jessica@validately.com, or to Laura directly. As Stephen said at the beginning, we will post a recording to this in the next day or two on our blog, so if you want to share with any colleagues or just have things you want to review for reference, you can do so. And, hopefully we will be kicking off additional webinar series in the future. And if you do want a demo, feel free to email Stephen@validately.com or myself, Jessica@validately.com. So thank you, everyone. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.